Welcome to week 7 of Political Ideologies. This week we'll be looking at the Enlightenment thinkers Immanuel Kant, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and John Locke. The Enlightenment, or the Age of Enlightenment, is a term used to describe a time in Western philosophy and cultural life that was centered upon reason and the advocating of reason as the primary source of legitimacy for authority. The Enlightenment developed more or less simultaneously across Europe, in Germany, France, Great Britain, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. It was buoyed by the North American colonists' successful rebellion against Great Britain in the Revolutionary War, the American War of Independence. The Enlightenment rapidly spread further than Europe, including the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Russia and Scandinavia, Latin America, and even inspired the Haitian Revolution. It's been argued that the signatories to the American Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Bill of Rights, and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen were motivated by Enlightenment principles. The terminology Enlightenment doesn't represent a single social movement or school of thought. Philosophies during this time were often contradictory and divergent, as we'll see with differing views of human nature and approaches to reason. The Enlightenment was much less a set of ideas than a set of values. At its core was critically questioning traditional institutions, customs, and morals. Immanuel Kant, one of the primary thinkers of the Enlightenment, was born in East Prussia, in the city of Königsberg. He studied at Königsberg University, worked there as a tutor and professor, and never traveled more than 50 miles from his home during his entire career. His father was a master harness maker, and his mother the daughter of a harness maker. He came from what we might call a blue-collar family. His outward life might have appeared simplistic, but his thoughts were revolutionary. He's known for his numerous contributions to political philosophy, only a few of which we're able to touch on here. In 1781, Kant published his Critique of Pure Reason, influencing Western philosophy to come. This work proposed the idea that came to be known as Kantian or transcendental idealism. Generally, Enlightenment thinkers were empiricists. For example, John Locke proposed the fundamental principle of empiricism. This idea of empiricism was that all of our knowledge and ideas arose from our experiences. We were born with our minds a blank slate and an empty room, and as we lived, we would furnish our mind with ideas of two sorts. The first type of ideas that would influence us, Locke thought, were sensations. We obtained our ideas from the things that we supposed existed outside us in the world. The second way in which we formed our ideas was reflection. We would have ideas through our own mental operations in looking at objects. For example, hard, red, loud, cold, sweet, aromatic would all be ideas of sensation. Perceiving, remembering, abstracting, and thinking would be ideas of reflection. Locke argued that pleasure, unity, existence would all be ideas that came to us from the combination of both sensation and reflection. Everything we know, everything we believe, and every thought we can entertain would be made up of these ideas and nothing else. The blank slate of the mind existed at birth and would only be filled through senses and through reflection. Kant, on the other hand, maintained that human experience consisted of how things appeared to us. Kant believed that there was a fundamentally subject-based component in each of us, which enabled us to form our experiences. The mind was not a blank slate, but empiricism was enabled by our faculties, and these faculties were not necessarily just derived from experience, but might be innate. Kant's theories are known as being deontological, meaning rules-based. He believed one could live one's life by questioning what would be right and wrong, and then following the right path. One of Kant's main accomplishments is setting forth what's called the categorical imperative. It's best known by its first formulation: act only according to that maxim, meaning rule, whereby you can at the same time will it should become a universal law. The idea here is that if a moral rule applies to one person, it must apply to everyone. For example, Jane might be wondering whether she should cheat on her political ideologies test. She might ask herself, is it wrong if everybody cheats? If the answer to this question is yes, her action will be wrong. If no, then her action will be okay. The categorical imperative might be criticized because of issues like this. What if a murderer were to ask where his potential victim is hiding? or the Nazis were to ask where you were hiding Jewish citizens during the Holocaust. The categorical imperative would tell you it was wrong to lie. However, morally, we believe that probably we should lie under these circumstances. Kant never really addressed this problematic issue. In the piece we read this week, What is Enlightenment?, Kant is responding to a newspaper editorial posed in the Berlin Monthly in 1784. The editors of the journal asked whether the clergy should any longer be engaged in conducting marriages. A number of the leading intellectuals at the time replied, but Kant's essay became the most famous. In his essay, Kant addresses what is enlightenment and how can men become enlightened. He notes, man's emergence from his self-incurred immaturity is the definition of enlightenment. According to Kant, immaturity is self-inflicted on people, not from a lack of understanding, but because we don't have the courage to use our reason, our inborn intellect, and our wisdom, without being told to do so by another. As humans, we fear thinking for ourselves. He exclaims that the motto of enlightenment is sapere aude, dare to be wise. The majority of people are not courageous and gladly remain in an immature state, thinking it's not only difficult but dangerous to emerge into enlightenment. It doesn't matter that the danger isn't great. We've been intimidated into thinking that it's dangerous. Therefore, we're fearful of taking the first step into thinking for ourselves. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is the second philosopher we read this week. He had quite a colorful youth, which he chronicled in his own work, Confessions. At 13, he apprenticed to a notary, then to an engraver who beat him. At 15, he ran away, ultimately finding refuge with a Catholic priest who introduced him to the woman who'd later become his lover, Françoise Louise de Warren. He was about 15, and she was 29 when they first met. Warren introduced Rousseau to the finer things in life, including music, of which he had a lifelong love. In 1742, he moved to Paris, thinking he would pursue his fortune by presenting a system of numbered musical notation he'd invented based on typography to the French Academy of Sciences. He thought this would make him rich. The Academy of Sciences unfortunately rejected the project, and Rousseau was eventually forced to take a position that was ill-paying as a post to a secretary of the French ambassador to Venice. After 11 months, he quit this position, but he took from it a profound distrust of government bureaucracy. He also is known for his friendship with French philosopher Diderot, who influences much of his work. In common with other philosophers of the day, Rousseau looked to the hypothetical state of nature as a normative guide. Rousseau deplored Thomas Hobbes for asserting that since man in the state of nature has no idea of goodness, he must be naturally wicked, that he's vicious because he does not know virtue. Rousseau, on the contrary, believed that uncorrupted morals prevailed in the state of nature. Rousseau does not suggest that the state of nature means that humans act morally. He simply says that morality and immorality do not necessarily exist. Humans in a state of nature may act with all the ferocity of an animal, neither good nor bad. Rousseau is most famous, perhaps, for introducing the idea of the social contract in 1762. As we note, he thought the state of nature was a primitive condition without law or morality, and human beings did not have within this state of nature the benefits of cooperating with one another. As society developed, division of labor and private property began to require the human race to adopt institutions of law. In this state of nature, man would be prone to frequent competition with fellow men, while at the same time becoming increasingly dependent on them for his livelihood. This double pressure would threaten both our survival and freedom. Rousseau thought by joining together in civil society through the social contract and abandoning claims of natural rights, individuals would be able to preserve themselves and to remain free. This is because submission to the authority of the general will of the people as a whole would guarantee individuals against being subordinated to the wills of others, and also ensure that they would obey, because they themselves collectively would be the authors of the law that governed them. We also this week look at theories of John Locke, an English philosopher who's considered the first of the British empiricists. As I mentioned, Locke, in his essay concerning human understanding in 1689, proposed a very influential view which said the only knowledge humans can have is a posteriori, i.e. based on their own experiences. He is famous for the proposition that the human mind is a tabula rasa, or a blank slate, on which the experiences derived from our sense impressions and perceptions during our lives are written. We read in this course the second, or part of the second, of Locke's two treatises on government. In this case, Locke also addresses the idea of the state of nature, wherein individuals are under no obligation to obey one another, but are each themselves judge of which the law of nature requires. He also addresses ideas such as slavery, property, representative government, and the right of revolution. Thanks for joining me in political philosophy this week. I look forward to speaking with you next week.